So let's continue talking about the Regency of God and who will not inherit it. Where if you haven't already, go back to my video 189 and watch from here, because the Regency of God is specific to what is called the mystery to uphedial, Ephesians 1, 9, and 10. So when Paul makes this statement that the unrighteous will not law accordingly allot the regency of God, this is specific to the heavenly on regency context. Again, watch those other videos. So he starts enumerating characteristics. He says, be not errorized, because the word errorized here is actually a key word to apostasy. 1 Timothy 4:1, for the Spirit declaredly says that in hysterical terms, some will apostatize from the faithing. So this is the verb form of the noun apostasy. Attending to error-rising spirits and to teaching through demons. So teaching through demons and attending to every wind of the teaching would be a characteristic of those who will not allot the regency of God. We're here in Ephesians 4:14, the method of the error involves being a minor, surging ones, and being carried about in every wind of the teaching through demons. The caprice of human, which caprice here means roll of the dice, cunningness, etc. So again, be not errorized, because those will not law accordingly allot the regency of God according to the mystery. This doesn't mean that they can't come in to the regency of the heavens, though, okay? Because this is specific. So he keeps enumerating characteristics. Horrors, idolaters, adulterers, soft ones, which would be an effeminate man. Men liars, male homosexuals. Thieves, covetous ones, intoxicated ones, beraters, robberish, okay, will not law accordingly allot the regency of God. There are many other characteristics that we can find in other verses, where here in Galatians, Paul categorizes these according to the works of the flesh. Similar characteristics: whoredom, uncleanness, wantonness, idolatry, sorcery, enmities, strife, jealousy, grimmings, strifts, dissensions, sex, envies, intoxications, boisterousness, and things like these, which I say to you beforehand, according as I also said, that those who are practicing such things will not law accordingly allot the regency of God. So one thing that stands out to me is strifts and strife and strifts. Because if we come to Philippians chapter 1 here, verse 15, Paul says that there are some who herald Christ. They're heralding Christ even because of envy and strife, which are characteristics of those who will not law accordingly allot the regency of God. So he's contrasting heralding Christ out of envy and strife with those out of love purely, not down announcing Christ out of strift, not purely. So remember that when we understand how to correctly cut the word of truth, because those who will not come into the regency of God doesn't mean they still will not come into the allotment at the finishing. And that's what Paul is saying here. So he says, whether those who are held in Christ out of pretext, which would be a negative characteristic, or truth, Christ is down announced. He is joyful, but he said, but also I will be made joyful on account of those. Why? Because Paul understood that even if they do not come into the heavenly on regency, they can still come into the regency prepared, concluding with Matthew 25:40. Those having been blessed allot law accordingly the regency, having been prepared from the downcast of the cosmos, different from the before in Ephesians 1:4, according to the heavenlies on blessing. So again, watch the previous videos. Seeing I have more time, let's hunt down some more characteristics of those who are practicing such things who will not law accordingly about the regency of God. Again, works of the flesh, which would include bitter jealousy. Bitter is another key word then, where we see strift mentioned here in James 3:14. In Romans 3:14, we see the mouth laden with bewitchment and bitterment. Don't be bitter. Every bitterment and grimming and wrath and crying and blasphemy, let it be lifted away from you together with all badness, which would be more characteristics of those who will not come into the heavenly on regency. Here's another key word: inflated, puffed up, the one for the one against the ulterior one. Corinthians chapter 4, Paul was speaking of those who are becoming inflated in their word, where here he says the regency of God is not in that, but in the ability. Then he says, what do you want? That I come to you with the staff? The staff would be pointing to those who will be locked out of the wedding feasts, not into the upward calling of the heavenly on gift. Staff are beatings. Luke 12:47 and 48. Beaten much, beaten little. Come back to Ephesians chapter 4. Here, Paul talks about the one stealing, steal no more. And then he says, any rotten word may not go out of your mouth. Rotten words. Here in Matthew, we see false testimonies in relationship to evil over considerations, murders, adulteries, whoredom, and thieveries. So this word here, over considerations, basically means or defines the process of one's thinking or deliberating within themselves according to their own reasoning or their own logic, rather than the knowledge and wisdom given of God in the Word. So they're just coming up with their own ideas and interpretations, not based in the truth. Here again in Mark 7:22, adulteries, covetousness, evilness, fraud, wantonness, evil eye, blasphemy, over appearances, unmindedness together, which would all be more characteristics of those who will not come into the heavenly on regency, according to the mystery. Here we see an occurrence of over considerations, thorough over considerations, according to those who have little faith, little faithing ones. Shameful words, Colossians 3:8, which would be in line with rotten words. Here's one, gossips, 1 Timothy 5:13, where we also see gossips in conjunction with wine drinking. 1 Peter 4:3, wine gossips. It's one word, which contains the stem of gossipry according to wine drinking, wantonness, boisterousness, drinking bouts, getting in fights, illicit idolatries. There's another one, conceited. Lest he be a young sprout, having been made conceited, he falls into the judgment of the diabolos, which is locked out of the wedding feasts at midnight. Those determining to be rich do fall into temptation and entrapment, into the many unthought and harmful desires which swamp the human in extermination and whole away loosening. Some more. Cosmic desires. Antagonizing, who are in the entrapment of the diabolos. Here, verse 26. That they may sober up, see, in contrast to being foolish, out of the entrapment of the diabolos. For those practicing such things will not law accordingly allot the regency of God, which again is specific. So, and there's more characteristics. I'm just running out of time, but I appreciate you watching, and share and like. God bless.